Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and epilepsy. Now, when I think about astrology and epilepsy, well, epilepsy is connected with the lack of, you could say, electrical equilibrium in the body. Now, and I would say Uranus and Aquarius would be very strongly connected with this because Uranus does rule electricity, and of course Uranus is a ruler of the zodiac sign Aquarius. Now, first off, I think if somebody has Uranus and or Aquarius energy strongly afflicted in their chart, it can increase a propensity toward epilepsy. This could be, now, you're talking about epilepsy. Epilepsy can often be attributed to some kind of brain trauma or deterioration of brain or some kind of, or just brain damage in general. And this could be something where when you look at this, Mercury, I would say, Mercury, Aries, and the first house can be connected strongly with the brain in astrology. Now, somebody say has Uranus or even prominent Aquarius energy making an adverse aspect to their ascendant, their Mercury, or even prominent Aries energy. This could increase the proclivity, I would believe, toward brain damage associated with the epilepsy. Now, as far as some aspects may go, if somebody say has their moon, I would say the moon making an adverse aspect to Uranus or strong Aquarius energy, this could be a trigger. If somebody has epilepsy, this could be a trigger perhaps due to emotional exasperation, and it might have something to do with a seizure occurring. Now, looking at this as well, now if somebody has Uranus in their natal chart, and let's say they have it in, when I say like strongly afflicted, say if it's like in a T square or a grand cross, now that could increase perhaps an issue or some connection with epilepsy for the person. Now, this is something, now depending on, let's say that somebody has epilepsy and they have a let's say they have a grand cross in their chart, but let's say or even a T square. Now let's say that they have it in mutable signs. Now there would be it might be worse for them in mutable signs, because mutable signs are the signs more associated with worry, anxiety, and stress, and that could often be associated with perhaps a trigger of epilepsy. It could be more worrisome energy in connection with it, worried about when one may transpire for the person. Now, if somebody has this Uranus and or strong Aquarius energy in their chart, and it's and let's say they have this involved again in a T square or a grand cross, but let's say the energy is in fixed signs. Now this, I would say, be an indicator perhaps of more enduring, persistent, and protracted seizures, or ones that might take a longer to actually start, but they might be more sustained and more persistent. And you have, when you're talking about, especially when you're talking about if something is in a grand cross, in astrology, many of you may have heard this could often be seen as a cross to bear. It could be a point of great tribulation and adversity in one's horoscope. And if they have, and if you have somebody has, they have epilepsy, and then they have Uranus and or Aquarius in this they have this in this grand cross, it could be something that could be very problematic. Now, let's say that you have something where, again, you have that Uranus and or strong Aquarius energy, and it's in, and you have it in a grand cross, but it's in cardinal signs. Now, and if the person does have epilepsy, this could be something that could be more quicker, more abrupt. Cardinal energy is more spontaneous, but what it is, it's something that would likely, I would say, be less sustained, because cardinal energy is more, it's less patient, so to speak. And that would be one thing about this that could be have a positive, and that at least it wouldn't be, I would say in cardinal signs more so, especially in contrast to fixed signs, it would not be as persistent or as protracted. Now, the thing about it is, let's say that somebody has this Uranus and or strong Aquarius energy making an adverse aspect to Saturn. There could be a greater proclivity or tendency perhaps toward bone damage as a result of the epilepsy, the seizures, and the convulsions, of course, that go with this. Now, also, too, transits can figure prominently in this epilepsy as well if somebody does have it. Remember when, sadly, that recently Disney actor Cameron Boyce had sadly passed away at this time due, I believe it was to some epileptic seizure. It was in his sleep. He had, at this time, now I don't know his time of birth, but I did a solar/sunrise chart for him, which puts the sun at the spot of the ascendant in the chart. Now, at this time, though, he did have transit Uranus make a long conjunction to his natal 12th house Saturn, and the Saturn was the ruler, is the ruler of his 8th house, his 8th house ruler actually. In this solar sunrise chart I did, and the 8th house, of course, is connected with death. And again, Saturn was the 8th house ruler in this case. And sadly, Uranus again could be connected with epilepsy, and then I would believe with seizures as well. And also too the fact that, and sadly he did die as a result of that seizure. I believe it was in his sleep. The 12th house rules the unconscious and sleep. So those are, so sadly the death did result of that, and the transit was indicative of this. Now, also in his chart, now he does have, he had what I saw was a fixed Grand Cross. I included the North Node in that, which included Uranus and Aquarius. And he also, in this chart, he had Uranus conjunct the midheaven or 10th house cusp. So sadly, he had, this did impact, I believe, maybe his public image to some degree, and he might have gained, he was certainly recognized, not being a very good actor, I'm sure, but somebody that did have the epilepsy. He probably didn't really do much as far as hiding it, and he probably did do some communication with others regarding this, that perhaps with other people that had this same situation in their life or had this same neurological issue. But the thing about this too is another thing about this as well. Now, I believe he also had transit Jupiter not far from his natal Pluto at this time, and as I've spoken about previously, that Jupiter can, though very strongly benign and benevolent, could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. In some cases, this could expand issues connected with death. If it's hitting Pluto. Now, another thing too is that I did talk about him having the fixed Grand Cross in his chart, and again, fixed Grand Crosses can often be about much tribulation and that cross to bear, much adversity. Now, I want to talk about someone that I knew at one point. She has in her chart has a Grand Cross, and included in the Grand Cross, she has talk about natally how this could affect someone, and using a chart as an example. Now, in her chart, she has the sun at 29 degrees Aquarius, it's an anaretic degree. And of course, Aquarius, I believe, can be connected with epilepsy because, again, it's ruled by Uranus, and Uranus does rule electricity, and epilepsy is associated with the lack of electrical equilibrium, or balance. And not only did she have the 29 degrees Aquarius sun, she also has it conjunct Mercury at a critical degree for the 4th degree. And as many of you may know, Mercury in Pisces is in its detriment and fall. this conjunction falls in her third house of mobility, and it is part, I mean, this is part of a grand cross. Hold on a moment, people. I'm sure this was very debilitating and limiting for her. Let me talk a little more extensively about her grand cross. Also, in her grand cross, now I want to go back to the 29th degree Aquarius sun. When you have 29 degrees in astrology, it could be that upheaval crisis degree, as many of you may know. Even though the ascendant may be predominantly connected, I do see this predominantly connected with the physical body. The sun can also indicate physical issues too, I think. And when you have the sun at 29 degrees can give some strong issues at times, I believe, with the sign, in connection with the sign it is in. Aquarius can be about things that are unusual or bizarre. She also, I think she had, it was something called, I believe, hemiplegias, where when you have like about half the body or near half the body immobilized and not moving in the way that the other half is, and she had that because half her body did not move, at least move fluidly. I think she had that. And a lot of times when you have, many of you may know, when you have that hemiplegia, you could also have epilepsy with it. It would be often derived from the same issue. That is what I believe it happened with her. And not only does she have that, and again, going back to the fact that conjunction, and then we're just talking about this one conjunction, that's only one proponent of this grand cross she has in the third house of mobility. So it strongly affected her mobility, I believe, more so than most people that would have had the epilepsy. Now, she also has Mars in Gemini in the sixth house of health, and of course Mars could be connected with the muscles, and of course I believe when you have like the epilepsy, it could be about muscle contraction as well. And Gemini, what's sad about, I mean, when you're talking about Mars, it could be, I mean, epilepsy could be about issues with muscle contraction. And another thing too is that having Mars and Gemini in the sixth house, this must have really been frustrating for her, because Mars and Gemini in the sixth house can be connected. I mean, person could have a lot of very restless energy and in their daily routine, and wanting to do maybe more than one thing practically simultaneously on a day-to-day basis. And the fact she having this hemiplegia and then the epilepsy connected with it, of course, could have been very exasperating to her. And she also, given that she also part of this grand cross she had, part of it too was Pluto was involved in this. And Pluto, of course, is connected with the bladder. And when you have epilepsy and the seizures, you can have the bladder issues as well at the time. She also has Jupiter conjunct the ascendant, but Jupiter is in the 12th house, and that's part of this grand cross configuration as well. And when you have, again, going back to Jupiter, could be very paradoxical, as I've stated before, could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have that tendency to enlarge and expand. It might have expanded and enlarged some physical issues with her. It's also the ruler of her first house. If you have someone has the ruler of the first house in the 12th house, that could be an indicator right there, I believe, by itself, of some issues with the physical body. It wouldn't surprise me if she be given it with Sagittarius. She may have also had issues connected perhaps with her thigh, or the or believe it, the liver or something, or with the sciatic nerve perhaps as well. So those are some things to look at. And again, another note on this person that has this, I mean, this horrible, I mean, really, I mean, this configuration, which I believe was strongly attributed astrologically to her epilepsy, is the fact that she also, what I thought too is, I mean, it's important to look at where Uranus is placed by house in the chart for somebody that does have epilepsy, because this could be the area in life or sector in life where it might impact the person very strongly. Now, this is what she told me. I'm taking her word on it. This same person stated to me one time that what happened was they did some kind of surgery on her in connection with her epilepsy. And what happened was she claims that she was on an episode on PBS, on the PBS, yes, the PBS television network, and it showed them doing the surgical procedure on her, and said that she was not even cognizant of that. She apparently was not notified of it. That's what she told me, and it was shown on a PBS station on some television on one of their episodes. I guess it probably was pertaining to epilepsy and seizures, I would presumably. But the thing about it is she has Uranus in the 9th house in her natal chart. Uranus in Leo in the 9th house. Now Uranus, in the 9th house, Uranus and Leo in the 9th house, this could explain why this was something that happened with her in connection with her epilepsy. That was where she got, this could have very well been global recognition, and because the 9th house, of course, is global communication, and the zodiac sign Leo is connected with notoriety and attention. So you could do the math on that, people. So anyway, people. And well, one last thing I want to talk about as far as this goes before I head out, people, is the fact that if somebody, now, not all hope is lost if somebody has this. I think in some cases it can go away. Somebody told me one time that they had seizures and they dissipated. So if this is something that can go away, progressions in the chart can help. If you have something like Uranus, or as I talked about before, prominent Aquarius energy, and it's in some kind of, say, strongly afflicted, say you have it in a T-square or a Grand Cross, and if you have separation of that energy by progression in your chart, then there can be some hope. I would also think another example can be maybe transit Uranus conjuncting your south node, making the separating conjunction from it, because that could indicate a separation from the epilepsy and seizures. Perhaps that is another example. Jupiter hitting your first house, could be more hope and optimism, and maybe perhaps some luck and fortune. It could be fortuitous, more for the physical body. Transit Jupiter hitting your Uranus or Aquarius energy, well, the problem is that could still be paradoxical. Sometimes it can enlarge and expand those issues, or it might be actually very auspicious and fortuitous for it. A lot of it, of course, could be predicated and dependent on other aspects it makes to points in your chart. Say if it made an adverse aspect to Saturn, it might actually cause more sorrow and despondency in connection with it. Maybe perhaps an adverse aspect to your own natal Jupiter might actually be something that could be a little bit more fortuitous and beneficial, perhaps. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for astrology and epilepsy. Now, stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing with you my my monthly horoscope segments. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.